The myth of the warship. In the vast, star-filled expanse of the galaxy, the war had raged for centuries. Different factions, each fighting for control, power, and survival, had clashed in an endless struggle. The battlefield stretched across planets, moons, and asteroid belts, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But there was one thing that kept hope alive among the people: a legend. The legend spoke of a warship so powerful that it could end the war in a single strike. This ship was said to have been built long ago, in an age when the galaxy was more united. It was called the Valiant Fury, a warship like no other. It had been designed to be invincible, its weapons stronger than anything seen before, its armor unbreakable. It was said to be so mighty that no fleet, no matter how large, could stand against it. But as quickly as it was built, the warship disappeared. Its creators vanished, and the ship itself was lost to time. Over the years, the stories grew. People spoke of the warship as if it were a myth, a tale passed down to children to keep them dreaming. It was a beacon of hope, but one that seemed far too fantastic to be true. Generals and soldiers had all heard the stories, but no one truly believed the ship still existed. After all, no one had seen it for hundreds of years. It was nothing more than a fable, a bedtime story to keep hope alive in a galaxy of endless war. But then came the turning point. The leader of the Empire, General Kale, stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the stars. His fleet was in a desperate situation. The enemy forces had overwhelmed his ships, and his men were exhausted. Victory seemed like a distant dream. The war had taken everything from them. His soldiers, his family, his home. Everything was gone, burned away by the flames of endless conflict. He could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. It was a weight that threatened to crush him. And he knew that if something didn't change soon, his people would be lost forever. Just as General Kale began to lose hope, something unexpected happened. A young officer, Lieutenant Tara, entered the command room. She was holding a data pad in her hands, her eyes wide with excitement. "General," she said, her voice trembling with anticipation, "I found something. A message. It's an ancient signal, encrypted with codes that haven't been used in centuries." General Kale turned to her, his brow furrowing. "What kind of message?" "It's from an old warship," Lieutenant Tara said. "The signal is coming from the edge of the galaxy. It's faint, but it's unmistakable. It's the Valiant Fury." For a moment, the room fell silent. General Kale couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Valiant Fury, the legendary warship. But that couldn't be possible. It had been lost to time. No one had seen it for centuries. "Are you sure?" General Kale asked, his voice low. Lieutenant Tara nodded. "I'm positive. I've cross-referenced the signal with ancient databases. It matches the specifications of the warship exactly." Kale's heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Was the Valiant Fury real, after all these years? If the warship had somehow survived, if it had somehow reappeared, it could be the turning point the Empire needed to win the war. "We have to investigate," Kale said, his voice full of determination. "Prepare a ship. We're going to find out if this is the real Valiant Fury." The officers in the room exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and hope on their faces. The myth, the legend, was beginning to come to life. The warship that had once been nothing more than a story was now a reality. But not everyone believed in the myth. Across the galaxy, the enemy forces had also heard the rumors. They laughed at the idea, dismissing it as nothing more than a desperate hope. The enemy had heard the tales of the mighty warship, but they didn't fear it. They thought it was just that, a tale, a fable. They had no reason to believe that such a ship could truly exist. But the Empire was different. They had always believed in the power of the story. For years, it had been the one thing that kept their spirits alive. And now, with the possibility of the warship being real, their hopes had been reignited. As General Kale and Lieutenant Tara prepared their mission, the entire Empire held its breath. The legend was no longer just a myth. It was a spark of hope in a galaxy that had been consumed by darkness for far too long. The warship that could change everything was out there, waiting. All they had to do was find it. The first steps of the journey had begun. The myth of the warship had become something more, a chance for victory, a chance for redemption, a chance for the galaxy to finally be free from the endless cycle of war. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to take a new turn. A glimmer of hope. The mission was set in motion quickly. General Kell's fleet moved toward the coordinates that Lieutenant Terra had uncovered. As they traveled through the stars, the tension on the flagship was palpable. The crew members, once burdened with hopelessness, now felt a sense of anticipation building in their hearts. They weren't just moving to a distant region of space. They were chasing the possibility of salvation. For days, the fleet traveled through the cold expanse of the galaxy, passing asteroid belts and distant moons. The silence in the command room was broken only by the occasional report from Lieutenant Terra as she continued to track the signal. Each new bit of data seemed to push them closer to the truth. The signal grew stronger, more distinct with each passing hour. It was undeniable now. The valiant fury was out there. General Kell stood at the bridge, staring out at the vastness of space. He had seen countless battles, been to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, but nothing had ever made him feel this way. A part of him still doubted the reality of the warship, but the other part, a part that had been buried deep under the weight of the war, clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the sign they had been waiting for. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Terra called out from her station. Her voice was steady, but the excitement in her eyes was impossible to hide. Kell nodded, his hand tightening on the railing. "Prepare for entry into the system. All hands on alert." As the fleet approached the outer edge of the sector, they entered an area of space known for its dense asteroid fields and chaotic gravitational anomalies. The farther they traveled, the less likely it seemed that the valiant fury could still be intact, hidden in such a dangerous region. But as they passed through a dense cloud of debris, something unusual happened. "Sir," came the voice of another officer, "we're picking up something. It's large, massive, larger than any ship we've ever seen." Kell turned toward the officer, his heart pounding. "What are we looking at?" The officer tapped a few controls, and on the main screen, a massive shadow emerged from behind a cluster of asteroids. It was a ship, a colossal structure, with sleek, angular lines and markings that had long been forgotten in history. The ship seemed almost alive, its metal exterior shimmering with a strange energy. This can't be," Lieutenant Terra whispered, her eyes wide. It's the valiant fury." Kell stared at the screen, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The legendary warship, thought to be nothing more than a myth, was real. It was massive, more than any ship in the fleet, and its design was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was a relic from an age-long past, but it was still here, in the middle of a galaxy on the brink of collapse, and it had the power to change everything. "Open a channel to the ship," Kell ordered. His voice was steady, but inside, his heart raced. There was a moment of silence, then the communication officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." "This is General Kell of the Empire," he began, his voice calm but authoritative. "We come in peace. We seek your assistance in ending the war that has plagued our galaxy. Will you respond?" For a long moment, there was only the sound of static. It was as if the ship itself were silent, waiting. But then, something unexpected happened. The warship, the valiant fury, began to hum, a deep, resonating sound that vibrated through the ship. The energy readings shot up, and the lights on the bridge flickered as if the ship was waking up. Lieutenant Terra's eyes widened. It's coming online. The systems are powering up. It's responding to us." Suddenly, a voice, old and worn, crackled through the speaker. "General Kell," it said, the words slow and deliberate. You have awoken me after all these years. I am the valiant Fury. I have been waiting. Kale could hardly believe it. The ship, the valiant Fury, was alive. It had been waiting for someone to find it, to awaken it, and now that moment had arrived. Are you able to fight? Kale asked, his voice steady, but inside, his heart was filled with hope. The voice of the warship answered, deep and resonant, I am more than capable. I was built for battle. But more importantly, I was built to protect. What is it you seek, General Cal? We seek victory, Cal replied, his voice filled with conviction. We seek an end to this war. If you will help us, we can reclaim peace for the galaxy. For a long moment, the ship was silent, as if considering Cal's words. Then it spoke again, its voice both ancient and wise. I have seen many wars, the ship said, but it is not the battles that matter most. It is the hearts of those who fight. You are not alone in this war, General Kale. I will help you, but you must be prepared to face the true cost of victory. With those final words, the warship's massive engines roared to life, and the fleet felt the power of the valiant Fury coursing through them. Hope had arrived, and with it, a new beginning. The valiant Fury was real, and it was ready to help reclaim the galaxy's future. As General Kale looked out at the mighty ship, he knew that the course of the war had just changed forever. The warship revealed, the valiant Fury was no longer just a legend. It was real. The massive ship loomed before them, its once dormant systems now coming to life with a force that could shake the very stars. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, the ancient technology intertwined with the powerful energy pulsing from within. The valiant Fury was no longer a story told around campfires. It was a living, breathing force in the galaxy's war. General Kale stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the warship as it began to move. It was slowly, but with an undeniable power, aligning itself alongside Cal's fleet. The once feeble hope that had flickered within him now burned bright, stoking a fire that could not be easily extinguished. This is it, Cal whispered to himself. This is the turning point. Lieutenant Terra, standing beside him, was equally awestruck. It's more magnificent than I imagined, she murmured. We've only heard rumors, but the truth is even greater than we ever thought. As the ship drew closer, a voice rang out from the ship's communication system. It was the voice of the valiant Fury again, calm yet deep, like an echo from the past. General Kale, your fleet is ready. I will take command of the battlefield from here. You must lead your men with courage, but I will provide the strength you need to win. You will not face this enemy alone. General Kale's heart raced. He had never been given such an opportunity. The valiant Fury wasn't just any warship. It was the weapon that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy's brutal conflict. With it at their side, they could finally face their enemies head-on. But it wasn't just about the ship. It was the chance to rally the galaxy, to bring hope back to those who had lost everything. We have to be prepared, Kale said, turning to his officers. This ship is more powerful than anything we've ever seen, but it's still part of a galaxy that is unpredictable. We don't know what dangers lie ahead. We need to be ready. The crew scrambled into action, coordinating with the valiant Fury as they integrated their systems. The warship's advanced technology easily interfaced with Cal's fleet, quickly establishing communication and command protocols. It was clear that the ship's systems had been built not just for destruction, but also for coordination and efficiency. As they moved into formation, the fleet's sensors began to pick up enemy movements. The enemy, the rival faction that had dominated the galaxy for years, had no idea what was coming. They were preparing for another attack, confident that victory was near. But they were about to learn a painful lesson. The valiant Fury had remained hidden for centuries, but it had been waiting for this moment. Now it was fully awakened, and its ancient weapon systems powered up with an almost terrifying speed. The entire fleet could feel it, an energy that crackled through the air, as if the very fabric of space was being torn open by the force of the warship's might. Enemy fleet detected. One of Cal's officers reported. They're not far from here. They're preparing for an attack. General Cal took a deep breath, his mind focused. He glanced at Lieutenant Terra. We're not waiting for them to attack us. We're going to take the fight to them. With a swift motion, he gave the command to engage. The fleet, led by the valiant Fury, surged forward like a tidal wave of destruction. The warship's engines roared to life, propelling it through the void of space with unimaginable speed. The sheer power of the ship was overwhelming, like a force of nature. As the enemy fleet came into view, Cal's crew began to ready their weapons, and the valiant Fury prepared its arsenal. The ship's massive guns began to charge, and energy pulses built up in its engines. The crew could feel the tension in the air. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. And then, without warning, the valiant Fury unleashed its first strike. A massive beam of energy shot out from the warship, lighting up the darkness of space like a supernova. The beam hit the enemy flagship with pinpoint precision, tearing through its shields and slicing through its hull like butter. The enemy ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The remaining enemy ships tried to respond, but they were no match for the power of the valiant Fury. With each shot, the warship decimated the enemy fleet, reducing their once strong forces to nothing more than floating debris. It was clear this was no ordinary ship. This was the ship of legends, the ship that could end the war. As Cal watched the destruction unfold before him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The valiant Fury was unstoppable, and with it, they had a fighting chance to reclaim their galaxy. But even as victory seemed within reach, he knew that this was only the beginning. The valiant Fury had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war was far from over, but now they had the power to fight back. The tide had turned, and General Cal knew that he would lead his people to victory, no matter the cost. As the last of the enemy ships were destroyed, the valiant Fury powered down its weapons, its energy reserves low after the intense battle. But the victory was clear. The legend had been proven true. That's just the beginning, Cal whispered to himself as he turned to his crew. Now we take the fight to the heart of their empire. The valiant Fury had returned, and the galaxy had a chance at peace once again. Activation of the legendary vessel. The victory was overwhelming, but it was only the first step. As General Cal's fleet drifted away from the remains of the destroyed enemy fleet, there was a brief moment of silence, filled with awe and disbelief. The valiant Fury had proven itself to be the key to their salvation, but Cal knew they couldn't afford to rest. The war was far from over, and the enemies were regrouping, preparing for another strike. On the bridge of the flagship, Cal gathered his top officers. Lieutenant Terra stood by his side, her eyes filled with excitement and trepidation. That was incredible, she said, still in shock from the scale of the destruction. The valiant Fury, it's more than we ever imagined. Cal nodded, his face grim. Yes, it's powerful, but we've only seen a fraction of its capabilities. We need to ensure the ship's systems are fully restored, and we must prepare for the next phase of the battle. We can't afford to be overconfident. Agreed, Lieutenant Terra replied. But there's something strange. The ship, it's not just a weapon. It's like it's waiting for something. Cal's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Terra hesitated for a moment, then said, I've been monitoring the valiant Fury's systems, and there's a strange energy signature coming from its core. It's almost as if the ship is alive, but not in the way we understand. It's waiting for something, or someone. Cal turned to face the massive warship on the screen, the valiant Fury now slowly moving through space. The ship had been dormant for centuries, but now that it had awakened, it seemed almost sentient, as though it had a purpose beyond simply fighting. We need to investigate, Cal said, his voice resolute. Prepare a team to board the ship. We'll find out what's going on." As the team gathered in the hangar bay of the flagship, they prepared for the dangerous mission ahead. Kale, Lieutenant Terra, and a few select engineers and officers boarded a shuttle, the small craft slowly moving toward the enormous Valiant Fury. The closer they got, the more the sense of awe intensified. The warship was massive, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings that none of them could understand. The shuttle docked with the warship's external airlock, and the team disembarked, stepping into a world that had been forgotten by time. The interior of the ship was like nothing they had ever seen. It was vast, with towering corridors lined with walls that seemed to pulse with energy. The technology was advanced beyond their comprehension, but there was also a haunting, ancient feel to the place, as if the ship had been waiting in silence for eons. As Kale and his team moved deeper into the heart of the Valiant Fury, they found what they had been looking for: an enormous chamber at the ship's core. At the center of the chamber stood a massive structure, almost like a throne, but not quite. It was a control room, but it seemed alive. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, and a low hum filled the air. The energy signature that Terra had detected was strongest here. "This is it," Kale said, his voice low. "This is what the ship has been waiting for." Lieutenant Terra stepped forward, scanning the room with her equipment. "General, the energy readings are off the charts. I can't explain it, but it's almost like the ship's core is linked to something or someone. It's as if it's alive, but not in the way we know life." Before Kale could respond, the voice of the Valiant Fury echoed in the chamber, sending a chill down everyone's spine. "I have awaited your arrival," the ship said, its voice deep and resonant. "I am the Valiant Fury. My purpose is not only to fight, but to protect. You have awoken me from my slumber, General Kale. But there is more to this war than you realize. My power is great, but it is not infinite." Kale turned to the ship's control center, his heart pounding. "What do you mean? We've seen what you can do. You destroyed the enemy fleet with ease." "The battle is far from over," the ship replied. "The forces you face are not just military. There are powers at work here, ancient and powerful. Forces that control more than just fleets. The war is part of something much larger, something that has been set into motion for millennia." Cal's eyes narrowed. "What are you telling me? Who are these enemies?" "The ones you fight are only the beginning," the voice of the ship continued. "There are those who seek control of the galaxy, yes, but they are not the true threat. You must prepare yourself for what is to come. For the ones who have been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike." Terra's hand hovered over her console. "General, the systems, they're reacting to the ship's energy. It's like it's drawing power from something outside of the galaxy." Kale stepped forward, his gaze intense. "What do we need to do?" The ship's voice seemed to grow more urgent. "You must seek the source, the power that has kept the galaxy in turmoil. I can help you, but only if you are willing to face the truth. You must be prepared to confront the forces behind the war. They are not who you think they are." The room fell silent, the hum of the Valiant Fury filling the air. Kale felt a knot form in his stomach. The war was just the beginning. There were forces beyond the battlefield, waiting to reveal themselves. "I'll do whatever it takes," Kale said, his voice unwavering. "If there's a greater threat, we will face it. We will end this war, once and for all." The Valiant Fury's voice seemed to soften, as if acknowledging Cal's resolve. "Then let us begin. The real battle is only just starting." With that, the warship's systems came alive once again, preparing for the next phase of the fight. Kale and his crew had awakened the Valiant Fury, but now they had to confront the hidden forces that had been manipulating the galaxy from the shadows. The war had taken on a new shape, and Kale knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The battle begins. The revelation of a greater, unseen force behind the galaxy's endless conflict had shaken General Kale to his core. He had entered this war with one mission in mind: to defeat the enemy fleet, reclaim control, and restore peace to the galaxy. But now, the true nature of the war was unfolding before him. The valiant Fury, awakened from its long slumber, held the key to not just winning the war, but uncovering the dark forces manipulating it all from the shadows. As the valiant Fury powered up its systems, Kale gathered his officers on the bridge of his flagship. The atmosphere was tense, filled with the weight of new knowledge and impending danger. Lieutenant Tara stood beside him, her eyes scanning the readouts on the console in front of her. "The enemy is regrouping," Tara reported, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "They've begun massing their forces on the border of the inner sectors. If we don't move quickly, they'll launch a full-scale assault on our colonies." Kale nodded, his jaw set in determination. "We can't allow that to happen. We need to strike first, take the battle to them before they have a chance to prepare." The fleet, now bolstered by the power of the valiant Fury, moved quickly into position. The warship itself, still resonating with ancient power, was fully operational, its vast weapon systems charged and ready for combat. It was as though the ship itself had a mind of its own, its energy aligning with Cal's mission. As they approached the enemy fleet, the magnitude of the coming battle became clearer. The enemy had not only fortified their forces, but also called upon mysterious allies from distant parts of the galaxy. Cal's sensors were picking up strange ships, unlike anything they had encountered before. They were sleek, dark, and unnervingly silent, moving in perfect formation alongside the more familiar warships. "Who are they?" Tara asked, her voice tense as she studied the unfamiliar vessels. Cal's expression hardened. "I don't know, but we'll find out soon enough." "General, the valiant Fury is ready to engage," came the voice of the ship's eye, deep and ancient. "You will need to make the first move." Without hesitation, Cal issued the order. "All units, engage. Make sure we take them by surprise." The fleet surged forward, and the first salvo of the battle was fired. The valiant Fury unleashed its devastating energy beams, cutting through the enemy formations with precision and raw power. The massive warship's weapons carved through the darkened ships, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. It was unlike anything Cal had ever witnessed. The enemy fleet retaliated with heavy fire, but the valiant Fury was like a living shield, its advanced armor and shields deflecting the incoming blasts. The ship was an unstoppable force, and Cal knew they had to make the most of it. "Lieutenant, deploy the fleet's fighters," Cal ordered. "We need to keep the enemy off balance and prevent them from regrouping." The fleet's squadrons of fighters launched into the fray, engaging the enemy ships in close-quarters combat. The battle was fierce, with laser fire lighting up the dark void of space. Cal could feel the pulse of the valiant Fury through his very bones, its energy surging as it tore through the enemy ranks. Despite their initial advantage, the enemy forces were not so easily defeated. They had their own powerful ships, as well as weapons Cal hadn't anticipated. The mysterious dark ships, which seemed almost organic in nature, moved with terrifying speed and agility, launching energy pulses that disoriented the valiant Fury systems. "We've never faced anything like this," Lieutenant Tara said, her voice strained as she adjusted her controls. "These ships, they seem to be drawing power from something outside the galaxy." "That's the force behind the war," Cal said grimly. "The shadow we've been chasing. But we don't have time to dwell on that now. We need to stop them here, before they reach our colonies." Cal's heart raced as the battle raged on, and the realization dawned on him that this fight was unlike any he had ever fought before. The valiant Fury was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. The enemy's new forces were too advanced, too deadly. For the first time, Cal felt a sense of doubt creeping into his mind. But then, as if to answer his doubts, the valiant Fury's AI spoke again. "General, the enemy fleet's flagship is vulnerable. If you can reach it, you will be able to disrupt their command and scatter their forces." Cal's eyes narrowed. "Prepare for a direct assault. We're going after their flagship." The valiant Fury surged forward, cutting through the chaos of the battle. With its immense size and firepower, The warship plowed through the enemy forces, leaving destruction in its wake. The fleet followed in its wake, their smaller ships picking off the scattered remnants of the enemy. As they neared the enemy flagship, Kel could see it clearly now. It was a massive vessel, darker than any ship he had ever encountered, with a twisted design that seemed to defy logic. It was surrounded by a cloud of smaller ships, but none of them stood a chance against the fury of the Valiant Fury. Kel's eyes remained fixed on the target. This was their moment. If they could take down the flagship, they could cripple the enemy's command structure and turn the tide of the war in their favor. "Fire everything we have," Kel commanded. The Valiant Fury's weapons flared to life, and a massive energy beam shot forward, slamming into the flagship's shields. The enemy flagship retaliated, but the Valiant Fury was relentless. With each strike, the shields weakened until finally, the Valiant Fury's final blow shattered the flagship's defenses. The ship erupted in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. With the flagship destroyed, the enemy forces began to scatter. The mysterious dark ships, once so powerful and coordinated, now fled into the unknown, leaving their allies behind. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, the echoes of destruction ringing in the void. The Valiant Fury had once again proven its might. The enemy had been driven back, but Kel knew this was far from the end. There were greater forces at play here, forces that had not been defeated, only pushed back. "We've won the battle," Kel said, his voice steady. "But the war is far from over. We've only just begun." The Valiant Fury had taken its first step in the galaxy's redemption, and Kel knew that with it, they would continue the fight. The true battle, the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy, was yet to come. The turning point. The victory against the enemy's flagship was decisive, but General Kel couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a temporary reprieve. The mysterious dark ships that had attacked them, ships unlike anything they had seen before, were only a part of something much larger. The battle had been fierce, but the true enemy had not yet revealed itself. The shadowy forces behind the war were still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the fleet returned to their home base, Kel gathered his officers in the command room of the flagship. Lieutenant Tara stood beside him, her expression as grim as his own. "We've won a battle," Kel said, his voice low. "But we've also learned something crucial. The enemy is not just an army, it's a network. There are forces beyond what we can see, pulling the strings, manipulating the galaxy from behind the scenes." Tara nodded, her face tight with concern. "I've been analyzing the data from the battle. And the enemy's forces, they don't operate like any normal fleet. The dark ships are powered by some external force, something we can't identify. It's like they're being controlled from somewhere. Someone is leading them." "We've been chasing shadows," Kel said, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "But it's time we faced the truth. There's someone else behind all this. If we want to end this war for good, we need to find the source of their power." The crew was silent, but the determination in the room was palpable. Kel knew what had to be done. The Valiant Fury had already proven itself to be a formidable force, but they would need more than just firepower to defeat this new enemy. They needed to uncover the truth, expose the darkness lurking in the heart of the galaxy, and end the war once and for all. "General," Tara spoke up, her voice steady but urgent. "I found something. A signal. It's faint, but it's coming from a distant system in the outer rim. It's older than anything we've encountered. It matches the energy signatures we saw from the dark ships." Kel's eyes narrowed. "So it's not over. They're pulling the strings from somewhere out there." Tara nodded. "It's our best lead. But we don't know what's waiting for us when we get there. If we go, we might be walking into a trap." Kel paused, weighing his options. He had no choice. They couldn't keep fighting blindly. They had to confront the source. If they didn't, the war would never truly end. "We're going," Kel said firmly. Prepare the fleet. We're going to the outer rim. We'll uncover who or what is behind this and stop them before they can strike again." The fleet set course for the distant system. As they traveled through the stars, the tension in the air was almost unbearable. The crew knew that what lay ahead would change the course of the war, for better or worse. The further they ventured into the unknown, the more uncertain the future became. They could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on them. The system they approached was a place few had dared to venture, a dark and desolate sector of space. The stars here were few and far between, their light dimmed by the dense clouds of dust and gas that filled the area. It was a place forgotten by time, a place that had remained hidden from the galaxy for centuries. As they entered the system, the sensors began to pick up strange readings. There was an immense energy source in the center of the system, its power unlike anything they had encountered before. It pulsed with a deep, resonating force, almost like a heartbeat, strong and unyielding. "That's it," Tara said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "That's the source." Cale felt a cold shiver run down his spine. They had found it, the heart of the enemy's power. But as they neared the energy source, something unexpected happened. The Valiant Fury's systems began to flicker and malfunction. The energy signature they were tracking was distorting their own readings, causing confusion and disorientation. "It's a trap," Cale shouted. "They knew we were coming." Before anyone could react, a massive shockwave rippled through the system. The Valiant Fury shuddered under the pressure, its shields flaring as it fought to maintain stability. The fleet scattered, but the gravitational forces of the system were too strong. The fleet was being pulled in. "Hold steady," Cale commanded. "We're not backing down now. Get us to that energy source. Now." The Valiant Fury's engines roared to life, pushing through the distortion field as Cale and his fleet fought to maintain control. As they neared the source, they could see it. An ancient structure, floating in the heart of the system. It was a massive blackened artifact, its surface etched with strange alien symbols. The source of the power was coming from within. "That's it," Tara said, her voice trembling. "That's where it all started." The ship's AI spoke again, its voice grave. "This structure is the key. It is the nexus of the power you seek to destroy. But beware. There are forces within that will stop you at any cost." Cale's heart pounded. He knew this was it. They had reached the heart of the enemy's power. The truth was finally within their grasp, but it would not be easy to confront. They were about to face the true enemy, the force that had been manipulating the galaxy from the shadows for centuries. As the fleet surrounded the ancient structure, Cale turned to his officers. "We fight until the end. We have no choice now. This is where it all ends." With the Valiant Fury leading the charge, the battle for the galaxy's future was about to take its final turn. The true enemy had finally revealed itself, and Cale and his crew would stop at nothing to defeat it. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Victory and legacy. The massive structure loomed ahead, dark and imposing against the backdrop of the distant stars. It was more than just a ship or a weapon. It was a symbol of everything the galaxy had endured. An ancient power, hidden away for centuries, finally revealed itself to those brave enough to uncover its secrets. And now, General Cale and his fleet stood on the brink of the ultimate confrontation. As the Valiant Fury drew closer to the blackened artifact, the full scale of the challenge became clear. The energy emanating from the structure was overwhelming, warping space around it, distorting everything in its path. The gravitational pull of the structure was strong, pulling at the fleet's ships, threatening to tear them apart if they didn't maintain control. "General, the energy readings are off the charts," Lieutenant Tara reported, her voice strained. "We're reaching the outer perimeter of the structure's influence. If we go any closer, the distortion field will pull us in completely." Cale stood firm, his eyes locked on the artifact. He knew they couldn't back down now. The enemy had been pulling the strings for far too long, and this was the final battle. It was either end the war or fall under the weight of this ancient power. "We're going in," Kale said, his voice unwavering. "Prepare the fleet for a direct assault. We'll take the heart of this structure and cut off the power source, no matter what it takes." The fleet, guided by the valiant Fury, pushed forward into the heart of the distortion field. The battle was not just one of firepower anymore. It was a battle of wills. They had to reach the center of the structure, where the power that had controlled the galaxy for centuries was anchored. As they drew closer, the artifact came to life. Dark ships, like the ones they had encountered in previous battles, emerged from its surface, their forms twisting and shifting as if alive. These ships were not just machines. They were part of the structure itself, connected to it in some unexplainable way. They were the guardians of the power, and they would stop at nothing to protect it. The valiant Fury's massive weapons powered up, firing on the advancing ships with deadly precision. But the enemy ships were relentless, their forms shifting and adapting in ways that defied logic. For every enemy ship destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. "General, the enemy is adapting faster than we can respond," Tara said, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to find the core. It's the only way to stop this." Kale knew she was right. The key to winning this battle wasn't in the fight. It was in reaching the core of the structure and destroying the source of its power. But the closer they got, the stronger the defense became. The artifact's core was guarded by a web of energy, its very presence threatening to destabilize everything around it. "All units, hold your positions," Kale shouted. "We're breaking through together. Give everything you've got." The valiant Fury surged forward, its weapons blazing, cutting through the energy web with each strike. The fleet followed in its wake, pushing through the chaos of the battlefield, determined to reach the center of the artifact. Finally, they'd reached it, the core of the structure. It was a vast chamber, illuminated by a dark, pulsing light at its center. The energy flowing from the core was immense, its power overwhelming. The valiant Fury's systems began to flicker, struggling to maintain control under the weight of the energy. "This is it," Kale said, his voice filled with resolve. "We end this now." He gave the order, and the valiant Fury unleashed its full arsenal, directing every bit of its power toward the core. Energy beams rained down on the chamber, striking the dark core with all the force the ship could muster. The entire structure trembled, as if in protest, but Kale knew there was no turning back now. The power from the core began to destabilize, crackling with energy as it fought against the onslaught. The artifact's defense systems came alive in a final desperate attempt to protect the heart of its power. But the valiant Fury was relentless, its weapons tearing through the last vestiges of resistance. And then, with a deafening roar, the core shattered. A brilliant explosion of light and energy erupted from the center of the artifact, sending shockwaves through space. The entire structure trembled and collapsed in on itself, the dark ships vanishing into the void as their source of power was destroyed. The artifact's grip on the galaxy was broken, and its influence vanished in an instant. The fleet, though battered and scarred, watched in awe as the power of the structure dissipated. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was free from the shadow that had loomed over it for so long. The battle was over. General Kale stood on the bridge of the valiant Fury, staring out at the empty space where the artifact had once stood. The weight of what had just transpired hung heavy in the air. The war was finally over, but it had come at a cost. The galaxy had lost so much, but now it had the chance to rebuild, to heal. "We did it," Tara said, her voice soft, filled with both relief and sadness. "We've won." Kale nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the stars ahead. "We've won, but the galaxy will never be the same. The valiant Fury has proven that sometimes the greatest victories come from the darkest of places." The voice of the valiant Fury echoed in the chamber, calm and steady. "General Kale, I have fulfilled my purpose. The war has ended, but I remain as a reminder of the sacrifices made and the strength found in the hearts of those who fought." Cale turned to the ship's eye. "And what of you?" The valiant Fury's voice was gentle. "I am but a relic of an age long past, a vessel of war and peace. My time is finished, but the legacy of those who fought will live on. It is now your galaxy to rebuild." With those final words, the valiant Fury powered down, its systems entering a deep slumber once more. The warship, the myth that had become reality, had fulfilled its purpose, and now it was time for the galaxy to forge its own future. As Cale looked out at the vast expanse of space, he knew that the legacy of the warship would live on, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of hope, courage, and the unyielding will to fight for what was right. The galaxy was free, and the future, though uncertain, was theirs to shape.